This is David Finzer broadcasting for the next 2 hours from the Gibraltar of the Balkans, the historic city of Novi Sad, along the banks of the beautiful Danube River here in Serbia. You can join our conversation by calling toll-free in the US and Canada at 1-855-655-2121 or by Skype at ORN Live, or for the terminally timid, you can email me at david@truthandliesradio.com or post a message on Truth and Lies Radio Show Facebook page. Remember, Overseas Radio Network's archives are available on overseasradio.com's website 24/7, so you can listen to whatever show you want, whenever you want. Well, according to the big clock, on truthandliesradio.com's FATCA, Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act page, your worldwide financial privacy will expire in 202 days, 13 hours, 50 minutes, and 8 seconds. Well, let's start with the Supremes. The Supreme Court has ducked its responsibility again. The Supreme Court has refused to hear an appeal challenging Barack Obama's U.S. citizenship and his eligibility to serve as commander-in-chief. Without even a comment, the High Court on Monday refused to grant a writ of certiorari, which is to grant the right of appeal, from Alan Keyes, Wiley Drake, and Markham Robinson. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled the challengers did not have legal standing to file the lawsuit, even though Keyes and Drake ran against Obama and Biden on the American Independent Party ticket for President of the United States in the last election, and Robinson serves as the party chairman. Now, this is probably the most cowardly act of the Supreme Court of the United States since Plessy versus Ferguson, when it ruled that separate but equal met the constitutional mandate of equal protection under the law. Every citizen of the United States should have standing to question the right of the man who claims to be the chief executive of the United States to hold that office. There has been so much evidence raised, and then to say they don't have standing, who does? If someone who ran against him and lost to him doesn't have standing, then what does it take? Are they going to deny cert if a state asks, if a state files? Suppose the Secretary of State of, say, the state of Arizona refuses to put him on the ballot because, and it tries to go to the Supreme Court on it. Are they going to deny cert on that too? Are they just going to duck it? It's their job to take decisions. And since the President of the United States is still the most powerful man in the world, it would be nice to have a clear and complete hearing on the merits of the case on whether or not this man, Barack Hussein Obama II, really is qualified to be President of the United States. And this is just a cop-out, and it stinks. Now, talking about stinking. My home state, Florida, has sued the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the Gestapo, over access to a database to verify the citizenship of residents, as the state is seeking to purge non-citizens and dead people from its voters' roll. Florida claims that the DHS has refused to give it access despite repeated requests. After the state filed suit, the Assistant U.S. Attorney General Thomas E. Perez slammed Governor Rick Scott's move in a 5-page letter, calling the state program faulty. Perez says the purge comes too close to elections and will endanger the rights of thousands of lawful citizens to cast ballots. Perez faulted Florida for ignoring warnings from the Justice Department to stop the voter purge, and he threatened to sue as well against the state. Quote, I've authorized the initiation of enforcement action against Florida in a federal court, he wrote. The significant problems you are encountering in administering this new program are of your own creation, he went on to say. Your claim that the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security have worked in concert to deny Florida access to the SAVE program is simply wrong. Please immediately cease this unlawful conduct. Florida's governor says, baloney, we have a right to access to this database. It's supposed to be used for voter registration. He says he hopes they'll give us the database, but we don't have a choice but to sue them because they will not. Florida's suit is part of Scott and the state's effort to remove illegal voters from the rolls. But before the 67 county supervisors of elections suspended their verification efforts because of these threats, 87 non-citizens had been found on the rolls already, at least 47 of whom have probably cast unlawful ballots. The Department of Justice ordered the state to drop the purge 2 weeks ago, saying it likely violated voting laws, particularly a National Voter Registration Act, which bans voter purges within 90 days of a federal election. Also on Friday, the American Civil Liberties Union sued Florida in federal court to stop the purge, saying it unfairly targeted minorities. I was unaware that illegal aliens and dead people were a protected minority. But apparently the American Civil Liberties Union thinks so. I mean, they defend every wacko group, and I'm all in favor of civil liberties, but somehow I have a real problem when the whole idea of creating the Department of Homeland Security was to make it a one-stop shop to verify, the real identity of people. You remember that, the Real ID law, etc. And what we've got is a situation now where they are blocking the state of Florida. And as I recall, the federal election is November. So, now let me see, we go backwards from November to October to September to August to July, and we're still in June. We're talking, plenty of time, so it's not within 90 days of a federal election. So there's no violation of the National Voters Act. It's just very simply that they want to continue the practice of illegal aliens who vote for the Democratic Party because they're the ones who give all the damn handouts, and dead people to vote in the election, and they are attacking it. So anyway, we have to break for a word from our sponsors, but we'll be right back. This is David Finzer at for Truth and Lies Radio on the Overseas Radio Network. This is David Finzer for Truth and Lies Radio on the Overseas Radio Network. Well, looks like our friend in the expensive public housing at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest could be to blame for Americans' drop of 39% in their overall wealth. The Federal Reserve, admittedly a dubious source, reported today that American families have about the same net worth under the Obama regime as they had 20 years ago when King George I, George H.W. Bush, occupied that same expensive public housing. It's sort of like the movie Groundhog Day. We get to go back and do it over again. The Fed's findings, which are contained in the latest survey of consumer finances, found that the median wealth for families plummeted by 39% to $77,300 in 2010, down from $126,400 in 2007. The median marks the point where half of U.S. families had more and half had less. The recession officially began in December 2007 and ended in 2009. That's officially. After adjusting for inflation, the Fed's report indicates that Americans are no better off than they were before the start of the dot-com bubble, the housing bubble, 9/11, or the Iraqi war. So I suppose One could recall the words of Ronald Reagan when he was campaigning against that peanut farmer, and he said, "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" Well, I don't know about 4 years ago, but you're certainly not better off than you were 5 years ago. And it is a real shame, but it's the government's fault. It is just bad. It's government by public theatrics as opposed to government by policy. Now, things appear to be heating up despite the best efforts of the establishment Republicans to keep the lid on the pot. The House Oversight Committee has scheduled a vote next week on whether or not to hold the Attorney General, Eric Holder, in contempt of Congress. It will be the fourth time in 30 years that Congress has launched a contempt action against a member of the executive branch. This time, as I've been reporting, the dispute comes from Holder failing to turn over documents subpoenaed October 12, 2011 in the Fast and Furious gun running investigation. The Justice Department has maintained it's cooperated fully with the congressional investigation, but according to Representative Darrell Issa, the Justice Department has refused to turn over tens of thousands of pages of documents. Those materials include created materials after February 4th, 2011, when the Justice Department wrote a letter to Congress saying no gun running had occurred. Then the Justice Department later retracted the denial. Like you've seen in every Perry Mason movie or darn near every lawyer show, at some point they ask, are you lying now or were you lying then? And Eric Holder obviously doesn't want to answer that. The answer probably is both times. The Obama regime has not asserted executive privilege or any other valid privilege over these materials. Federal officers died because of the gun running operation. 2 of them were killed because it went awry. Now, when the arms for hostages and the arms for drugs deal came out in the Reagan administration, boy, they were big on getting all the information then. But now the Attorney General, the chief law enforcement officer of the United States, is ignoring the congressional committee that has the authority over his department, that in fact could abolish his department. That would be funny, actually. I mean, this is what they shouldn't hold them in contempt. What they really should do, if they had any intestinal fortitude, is Congress, when ought to start, when the executive authority starts playing these games like this, just stop funding that department. Nobody's going to come to work if they're not going to get paid. And there is no court in the world that can order Congress to appropriate money except for the courts. The Constitution does guarantee that the judges can't have their salaries cut while they're in office. But, in this case, Congress doesn't have that much guts, but at least Darrell Issa has pushed it despite the opposition of the Speaker of the House, and it's going to come up for a vote. And if the Republican majority on that committee does not vote to take a contempt citation to the full House, then they're not doing their job. They are there to protect the people of the United States and to oversee that the executive authority enforces the laws that Congress makes in a proper manner. Of course, scandal with the Obama administration is sort of like sex in the Clinton administration. It's everywhere. The Secretary of Commerce, John Bryson, is under investigation by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office after an alleged hit-and-run accident. After leaving the scene of the first accident, Secretary Bryson was found in his car unconscious after hitting a second car. There was no immediate indication that alcohol or drugs had played a role in the collisions, according to the police. Of course, there was no immediate thing. He must have just fallen asleep. Maybe he has a sleeping illness. Maybe he's mentally deranged. I think one would have to be to want to be part of that administration. But this becomes the Chicago style. I like Chicago style pizza. And I love a lot of the food in Chicago. In fact, Chicago is one of my favorite Yankee cities. But I don't like the way Chicago politics is run. And this gangsterish, thuggish way in which the Obama administration ham-handles everything is just absolutely beyond the pale. And frankly, if Barack Obama were not black, he would be under much more attack than he is. This would not be tolerated by a white Republican president. But he can play the race card. He's really good at being a celebrity. He's a lousy president, but great at being a celebrity. He is not in control of his own administration, or if he is, he's controlling them, saying you can do whatever the hell you want. He is not managed to get a budget passed through the Senate that his own party controls. He ignores Congress and the courts. He issues executive orders giving himself all the power. I mean, this is like Al Capone sitting in the White House. And it's scary. And I know a lot of Americans who are telling me privately, I had one tell me today, they want to get out of the United States before October because they're afraid that the October surprise is going to be some lockdown of the borders because of some American security issue that Obama cooks up. I don't know if they're right or wrong. Now we have to break for the news at the bottom of the hour and a word from our sponsors. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Don't forget to check out our Facebook page. This is David Finzer for Truth and Lies Radio on the Overseas Radio Network.